In this video, I'd like to walk you through the process of how to create your circle graph. Here's the list of steps I'm going to follow. I'm going to start by determining what percent of the total population chose each answer. And to do that, we divide the number of people who chose an answer by the total number of people who were included in the survey. To change that decimal to a fraction, or from a fraction to a decimal and then to a percent, I will multiply by 100. Next, after I have those percents, I'm going to divide the 360 degrees into segments that represent each answer. Now to do that, I'm going to go back to this first step of dividing the number of people who chose the answer divided by the total number of people. And then I'm going to multiply that answer by 360. That's going to give us the measurement of the angle for each segment, because as you recall, if I went all the way around a circle, that's 360 degrees. So as we find each percent of that 360 degrees, we'll know how many degrees each segment should take up. Next, I'm going to trace a nice, neat circle onto the paper, and the circle should take up most of the paper. So for example, if you're using a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, then let's imagine that this piece that you see right here is 8.5 by 11. Then when I trace the circle, and I am going to recommend that you find something you can trace, like a plate or a lid, but it should take up most of that circle. If you measured across your circle, it would be somewhere between 7 and 8 inches all the way across, because that standard paper is 8.5 inches. But I'm going to trace a circle onto the paper, and it should take up most of the paper, and then I'm going to use a protractor to draw each of the segments. Now, a protractor is a tool that you use to measure the degrees of an angle. You don't have to purchase a new protractor. You can use an online protractor, which if you go back to the Blackboard folder, you'll find at the bottom of the items listed in the Blackboard folder, you'll find an online protractor that you can use. Let me practice through this process. Here I have a chart for a survey. Let's say that we asked, what's your favorite ice cream? 3 people chose Blue Moon, 1 blueberry, 4 chocolate, 1 strawberry, 3 vanilla. The total, if I add 3 plus 1 plus 4 plus 1 plus 3, is 12. Now I'm going to divide by the total. So I would do 3 divided by 12, 1 divided by 12, and so on. Notice that if I added all the way up, I should get a 1, 12 out of 12. And then I could multiply by 100. If I do the division, 3 divided by 12 and multiply by 100, I'll get a percent. Or if I go from that 3 divided by 12 and multiply by 360, I'd get how many degrees that is. Here's the completed chart. You can see that 3 divided by 12 was 0.25. 0.25 times 360 degrees gave me the 90 degrees. And 0.25 times 100 gave me the 25%. Remember, to multiply by 100, I'm simply going to move that decimal 2 places to the right. But if you're more comfortable doing so when that number's in your calculator, you can just multiply by 100. Make sure that when you do the multiplication that you're not using a rounded answer. Here's what I mean by that. When I do 1 divided by 12, I'm going to actually get 0.08333, and those 3's keep repeating. I'm not going to round that before I multiply by 360. I'm going to keep that number in the calculator and then do times 360, and that's how I get this 30 degrees. Same thing with 4 divided by 12. We get a repeating 3. And when I leave that in the calculator, 0.333333 all the way to the end, times 360, I get the 120, and so on. Here's how you can double check that you've made all the calculations correctly. I should, when I add up this first column, we got our total. After that, we're going to add up to a 1. Add up the percent should come to 100%. And adding up the degrees should come to 360 degrees. And that's how I know, or one way I know that I've got accurate answers here. That's the chart. Let's take the chart and now move on to the circle. To get the circle, I've traced a circle here, and I've started with my center point. So if I locate the center of my circle and I draw the first radius out, I'm going to now use the protractor. I'm going to go ahead and put these in order from smallest to biggest. You don't have to do that, but I like to do a chart doing it in order by size, starting with the smallest. So I'm going to use my protractor to measure 30 degrees. And that's where I make the first segment. And then I'm going to see the second one is 30 degrees. So I'm going to measure 30 degrees again to draw the next segment. Next I need a 90 and a 90. So I use a protractor and get 90 and 90. And then I can use the protractor to confirm, to check that this last one should be 120 degrees. The last step, so after I use that protractor and measure the 30, and then the 30, and then the 90, and then the 90, and then that last one's 120. The last step is to write into each of the segments the name and the percent. The final touch is going to be adding some type of color. So I might choose a color that's symbolic of that didn't really turn out to be very much of a blue. It's more of a gray, right? But I'll use this grayish blue for blueberry, and then strawberry. So some type of color, way to color. I would stay away from crayon. Crayon doesn't look very college level, does it? But a highlighter or markers, or find something creative. What would work well for you? Blue Moon, my personal favorite, because I'm from southwestern Michigan. Maybe you've read that and what's Blue Moon? If you ever travel to Kalamazoo, Michigan, or the southwestern Michigan, I hope you'll have a chance to try Blue Moon ice cream. I have yet to determine what it is exactly. I think it has some type of a nutmeg in it, something of that nature, but delicious kind of a blue ice cream, and it's this bright blue like what you see here. Vanilla, I'm going to leave uncolored, and then chocolate, let me see if I've got a nice brown. So I'm highlighting, I'm using a highlighter. You could use markers or maybe colored pencil, something to add some color. Or maybe you'd use some patterns. So, for example, if you're not going to use any color, you could maybe put stripes for one and polka dots for another, etc. Whatever works for you to make your graph look really nice and neat. Now remember that this is a college level project. This end product should really look like college level work, which mine doesn't quite. It's hard to do that on this tablet. But make sure you're making college level looking work, and it may mean that you have more than one draft, so don't be afraid to try a few different attempts before you get your final product. The next step is going to be doing let me add a page here. The next step is going to be the histogram, and I can use this same chart for the histogram. So while we're here, let me erase this chart, the pie chart, and do a real quick histogram. A couple things about a histogram. It's kind of similar to a bar graph, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, but it has a few differences. On the left, what I've got is the number of people, so I'm going to label that. I had everywhere from 1 to 4 people that selected each type of ice cream. And on the bottom, I could label this ice cream flavors. And this is reminding me that on my circle graph, I forgot a really important part, the title. I'm going to be sure to remember that. For this one, I'm going to write the title here, favorite ice cream. I'm going to go ahead and go back here to my circle and add that title because that's an important part. So we've got a title there for the graph. Here's how we draw our histogram. We're going to start with Blue Moon. It looks like there were 3 people said that Blue Moon was their favorite. And then we've got 1 person who chose blueberry. Notice that these 2 rectangles are touching. I want to recommend that you use a straight edge, a ruler, a piece of paper, something to get nice straight lines. You could go back and color each of these rectangles later. We've got 4 who selected chocolate. Notice that the width of each rectangle is equivalent. 1 strawberry, 3 vanilla, and that's all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total. So the 1 was strawberry and 3 vanilla. You could see that we can see that chocolate was the most popular, strawberry and blueberry were the least popular, etc. So that's something nice about this type of a chart, this histogram. Again, make sure that the bars are touching, make sure they're each the same width, and that we've got nice rectangles. Well, I hope that this has helped you with the circle graph and with the histogram. And please reach out to me if you have questions about how to complete your graphs.